Unit 6, page 49. Read. Exercise 3. Read and listen to the text.
High flyers. Fraser Docherty. Fraser Docherty from Edinburgh, Scotland, loved his grandmother's jam, and at the age of 14 he decided to learn all of her recipes. However, Fraser was soon coming up with his own flavours, and they were so tasty that he was making 1,000 jars of jam a week to sell in his neighbourhood. Fraser soon realised that jam making could be a lucrative business, and he wanted to move to a factory, so he spoke to various jam manufacturers. Unfortunately, although they liked his recipes, they told him he was too young. They also asked him how much capital he had for the project. His answer was nothing. Obviously, this didn't make his idea a very attractive proposition. However, Fraser persisted, and he finally found a factory in the north of England that was willing to take a risk on his jams. It was a risk that has paid off. Fraser's jams are now on the shelves of some of Britain's most important supermarket chains, and they have made him into a rich young man. However, he donates a lot of money to charity, especially to organisations that work with some of his biggest clients, elderly people. Yasmin El Safi. Even though the teenage magazine market is enormous, what do you do if you think that the mainstream media doesn't deal with the topics that interest you? As far as one American Egyptian girl was concerned, there was only one answer. Write, edit, and produce your own magazine. Yasmin El Safi from California published the first edition of MG magazine in 2005 when she was almost 14. The magazine is aimed at girls between the ages of 12 and 18 and offers subscribers a wide range of articles from contributors from as far away as Britain and Kuwait. Although Yasmin loves writing, she says that most of her time is now taken up with running the business side of the magazine. In a recent interview, she said she was a writer, photographer, graphic designer, publisher, and salesperson. She also explained that her mother had had an important role in the magazine's success, always giving her good business advice. Yasmin has discovered that running your own business is extremely hard work, but at least she can now find a magazine that she thinks is worth reading. Suhas Gopinath. As a young teenager, Suhas Gopinath from Bangalore in India dreamed of being a vet. But when his father returned home with a computer and a modem, he started planning for a different future. By the age of 12, he had already built his own website, and a few years later he launched his own computer consultancy. Suhas' firm helps clients with web design, online shopping, and internet security. The company is constantly growing, and as a result, Suhas is always looking to recruit new staff. But if you're over 25, don't apply for a job. Suhas, who was at one time the world's youngest CEO, Chief Executive Officer, told the local newspaper that he wanted to work with young colleagues. He also added he wasn't too worried about an applicant's qualifications and claimed that enthusiasm was more important than exam results. So far, Suhas' recipe of youth and eagerness seems to be working for him, as his company now has 11 branches around the world, and he was voted Young Global Leader by the World Economic Forum in 2008.
Unit 6, page 52. Listen. Exercises 1 and 2. Listen to the conversation.
So, I want to start my own business during the summer holidays.
What? Are you joking?
No. I went to a talk at school about teenage businesses. The presenter said that there were quite a few teenagers that ran small companies from home.
What sort of companies?
He mentioned web-based companies, people who produced homemade food, designed T-shirts, taught...
Teaching?
Yes, teaching. He told us about a 16-year-old girl who taught basic computer skills to retired people.
That's a good idea.
Yes, it is. He also explained what we had to do before starting. For example, you have to do some market research first.
Why?
Well, you need to know if there is a market for your service or product. If nobody's interested, then it won't be very profitable.
Of course. And if there are lots of rivals, it will be difficult to break into the market.
Exactly. We have to study the competition and maybe look for a niche market and offer a specialised service or product.
It sounds interesting, but what about the startup? You need money to start a business.
Right. That's why he talked about businesses with low overheads. He also said we had to make a business plan to see what supplies we would need and what our expenses would be.
So what are you planning?
A What's On webpage.
What's that?
It's an online magazine that tells people what's happening in the city every week. You know, plays, concerts, information about restaurants, things like that.
But doesn't the local newspaper do that?
Well, it doesn't give much information about events, and it leaves out some altogether. I'll have sections for children, teenagers, parents. It'll be much more detailed than the newspaper, and I'll make a profit by selling advertising space on the page to businesses in town.
It sounds like a great idea. Have you told your parents?
That's the first thing I did. They advised us at the talk that we should get our parents' permission for anything we wanted to do. They also said that if they liked the idea, they might help us with funding.
Well, I'm impressed. Maybe you'd like to employ me.
Let me get started first.
Unit 6, page 55. Language skills. Exercise 1. Listen and check.
Do you mind if I ask you a few questions about what you read in your free time? It's for a report I'm writing.
No, fine. What do you want to know?
I was wondering if you subscribe to a magazine.
Yes, I get Young Scientist every month. It's usually got interesting articles on nature.
And do you read a newspaper?
Not every day. I usually read the reviews of good films or books on Saturday, and there's a column by a writer I really like in the weekend edition.
Does anyone else in your house read the newspaper?
Well, it's my dad who buys it, but he doesn't really read it. He just looks at the headlines. My brother is always looking at the classified ads to see if he can find a cheap second-hand bike.
Well, one last question. Do you ever watch the TV news?
Not really. I prefer the radio. I can't stand all those TV advertisements.
Me neither. Thanks for answering my questions.
Good luck with your report.
Everyday English 6. Teacher's Book. Page 112. Making a point. Exercise 1. Listen to the dialogue.
Andy, we have to decide on the type of poster for our play. Which one do you prefer?
Personally, I think that the Shakespeare image is by far the best. It's instantly recognisable and it gives an indication that our play is in English. Also, a black and white poster will be much cheaper to print. What do you think?
It's true that A Midsummer Night's Dream was written by Shakespeare, but I reckon that a picture of the playwright is a little dull. In my opinion, we should use the photo of our actors performing. It's far more personal than the Shakespeare picture and a lot more cheerful.
I can't deny that the Shakespeare picture is slightly dull, but at least it shows what our play is about and who it's by. All that people will understand from the other picture is that we're putting on a play.
I see what you mean about the nature of the play, but people will know it's a Shakespeare play when they read the title on the poster. I would still say that the actors performing will attract more people than the Shakespeare picture.
Of course, we need to find an effective picture, but having said that, I still think we need to consider our budget.
So, which picture are we going to choose?
I don't know. Let's ask the others what they think.
Everyday English 6. Teacher's Book. Page 112. Making a point. Exercise 4. Listen and repeat the expressions.
As far as I'm concerned,
Personally, I think that...
I reckon that, in my opinion,
Admittedly,
it's true that,
I can't deny that...
I see what you mean.
However, this doesn't alter my view that...
I would still say that,
But having said that, I still think...
Everyday English 6. Teacher's Book. Page 112. Making a point. Exercise 5. Listen to the dialogue.
So, Matt, we've got these two ideas about how to raise some money for the school football team. Which one do you think is best?
Personally, I prefer the idea of selling refreshments during the matches. It's a much easier way of making money, and it doesn't require a lot of organisation. On top of that, our games will become a social event, and more parents will come to watch. As far as I'm concerned, it's a brilliant idea.
I agree up to a point, but we haven't got anywhere for people to sit. In my opinion, we should stage an exhibition of our skills and charge an entrance fee. Some of our players are really good, and it would be an opportunity for them to show what they can do. Also, we would make the money in one day, and it wouldn't only be our parents who would be contributing the cash.
I can't deny that we have some excellent players, but having said that, I don't know how many people would pay to come and see us demonstrating our skills. Going back to the question of where to serve the refreshments, all we need is a tent and some tables, which we can borrow from one of the parents. I would still say that this is by far the best idea.
OK then, that's settled. If you can get hold of a tent and some tables, we'll start serving refreshments at a reasonable price during the next match. Does that sound all right?
That's fine by me.
Literature Corner 3. Page 56. Exercise 2. Read and listen.
Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. One morning, about a week after Bingley had proposed to Jane, a carriage arrived outside Longbourn House. Elizabeth, Kitty, and their mother were in the sitting room, when suddenly the door was thrown open and their visitor entered. It was Lady Catherine de Bourgh. They were all extremely astonished. Mrs. Bennet, flattered to have such an important visitor, received her with great politeness. After sitting for a moment in silence, Lady Catherine said very stiffly to Elizabeth, "I hope you are well, Miss Bennet. That lady, I suppose, is your mother, and that, I suppose, is one of your sisters." Elizabeth replied that she was correct in thinking so. Lady Catherine rose and said, "I would like to have a walk in your garden, Miss Bennet, if you could accompany me." "Go, my dear," cried Mrs. Bennet. "Show her ladyship the different walks. I'm sure she will like them." As they passed through the hall, Lady Catherine opened the doors into the different rooms, looked in, and declared them to be reasonable-looking rooms. They went into the garden in silence. Elizabeth was determined to make no effort at conversation with a woman who was being more than usually rude and disagreeable. Lady Catherine began speaking when she was sure they were alone. "You must know, Miss Bennet, why I have come." Elizabeth looked surprised. "Indeed, you are mistaken, madam. I have no idea why you are honouring us with a visit." "Miss Bennet," replied her ladyship angrily, "however insincere you may be, you shall not find me so. A most alarming report reached me 2 days ago. I was told that you, Miss Elizabeth Bennet, would soon be engaged to my nephew, my own nephew, Mr. Darcy. Although I knew it must be a shameful lie, and I would not offend him by supposing it to be possible, I decided at once to come here to let you know my feelings. If you believed it to be impossible, said Elizabeth with disdain, I wonder why your ladyship took the trouble of coming so far. I came to insist on having this report contradicted. Tell me, is it true? Your ladyship may ask questions which I shall not choose to answer.
Skills Roundup, 5 to 6, page 57. Listen. Exercises 1 and 2. Listen to the radio programme. Are you looking for something different to do this weekend? Then why not go to the Tewkesbury Medieval Festival? This festival has been going for 25 years and is getting bigger and bigger every year. But what does the festival celebrate, and what can you do there? We sent reporter Sandra Evans to find out.
I'm here in the middle of a field in Tewkesbury, a small town in the southwest of England. And here in 1471, there was a historic battle. But why, I can hear you asking, should a battle that occurred over 500 years ago be the subject of a summer festival? Well, to get the answer to that question, I spoke to one of the festival organisers, Derek Churchill. Derek, what can visitors to the festival expect to see?
Well, Sandra, for the last 25 years we've been recreating the battle that took place here between the houses of Lancaster and York in 1471, and people can come and see what a medieval battle was really like.
So, how do you recreate a battle? It sounds as if it might be dangerous to me.
It can be for the combatant sometimes, but fortunately we don't have too many injuries. We have 2,000 participants dressed in exact copies of the uniforms and military clothes of the period.
And they are all carrying weapons, aren't they?
Yes, they are. However, although the swords look very realistic, they're actually made of wood, not steel. We want the battle to be realistic, but not too realistic.
I'm glad to hear that. Now, the battle is not the only event, is it?
No, we also build a small medieval settlement so that people can see what life was like in that time. And there's a market where people can buy clothes and shoes that have been made as they were made in the 15th century.
And you can eat medieval food too, can't you?
Well, we cook food in the way it was served in the 15th century. We don't actually sell food that's 500 years old.
I hope not. Thank you, Derek, for telling us about the festival.
It's been a pleasure. We're here every year at the beginning of July, and if your listeners come to visit, we're sure they'll have a great time.
I'm sure they will.